hasn't even been 24 hours, but Kash Patel's testimony on Capitol Hill yesterday is already raising major alarm bells over whether or not the director of the FBI was telling the truth to Congress, not just about the news accounts of his excessive drinking on the job, the administration of polygraph tests at the FBI, or of firing agents for political reasons, but also about the very statistics that he relied upon to defend his job amid all those embarrassing headlines.
What does it actually take for the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the most powerful domestic law enforcement agency on the planet, to stand before the United States Congress and lie, not stumble, not misremember, not round a number in the wrong direction, but deliberately, calculatedly, and systematically lie? And what happens when the people working inside that very bureau, the career agents and former officials who have given decades of their professional lives to that institution, finally decide that they have seen enough, that they have stayed quiet long enough, that the cost of silence has become greater than the cost of speaking, and they walk to reporters, put their names on the record, and say out loud what they have been watching?
About the simple principle that the people who run the agencies of government should not be permitted to manufacture false numbers and wave them before Congress as proof of performance, needs to understand exactly what happened, how it happened, why the sources who are speaking out chose this moment, and what is actually behind every single statistic that Kash Patel lifted above his head in that Senate hearing room and dared anyone to dispute. Because less than 24 hours ago, Kash Patel walked into a United States Senate hearing room, raised a large black placard covered in statistics high above his head, looked directly at the cameras, looked directly at every senator in that chamber, and said the words the mission their sources inside the Bureau had already been telling them for weeks that those numbers were, in the words of one current official speaking on the record, bogus. And that one word bogus is not a casual complaint from a disgruntled employee. It is a precise and deliberate characterization offered by someone still employed inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who understood completely what it meant to attach their name to that statement, who understood the professional risks involved, who understood the environment they were operating in, and who chose to speak anyway because they believed the American public deserved to know what was being done to their institution. And tonight we go through every claim, every manipulated statistic, every
45,000 violent offenders arrested under his leadership, a dramatic figure designed to be dramatic, designed to sound historic, designed to land in a headline and stick in a mind, and it is built on a foundation that his own agents describe as deliberately dishonest, because here is what actually happened beneath that number, here is the machinery behind it, here is what it took to manufacture it. When Kash Patel assumed the director's chair at the FBI, there existed a clear, long-standing institutional standard for what constituted an FBI arrest, a standard that had been in place for years before he arrived, a standard grounded in the basic principle that if the FBI was going to take credit for a law enforcement action, the FBI had to have...
And that standard was simple, and it was honest, and it accurately reflected the work the Bureau was actually doing. And Kash Patel quietly rewrote it, and under the new policy he put in place, none of those requirements apply anymore. Because under Patel's new standard, if an FBI agent is anywhere near an arrest present at the scene, riding alongside another agency, assisting in a supporting role, standing in the vicinity while officers from a completely different federal or local agency put handcuffs on someone, that arrest is now counted as an FBI arrest, even if the FBI did not lead the investigation, even if the FBI did not build the case, even if not a single FBI agent touched a single individual. And now
Minneapolis, Memphis, dozens of communities. And in every one of those operations, ICE officers led the operation. ICE officers made the arrests. ICE officers detained the individuals. And every single one of those arrests made by ICE, not the FBI, was counted under Kash Patel's rewritten policy as an FBI arrest and folded into that 45,000 figure he waved before the Senate. So that doubling he boasted about, that historic surge in arrests he presented as proof of his leadership, came not from more criminals taken off American streets, not from more investigations closed, not from more victims protected, but from a policy change, a deliberate administrative rewrite that moved numbers from one column to another and then allowed Kash Patel to...
And one current FBI official speaking on the record to reporters at enormous personal risk said this: "They are absolutely padding the stats and claiming arrests they would not have claimed." And a former FBI official added that agents inside the Bureau complained frequently about Patel's bogus arrest numbers, and that Kash is definitely engineering things to pad his stats. And that word engineering is worth pausing on, because a former law enforcement official did not say miscounting, did not say misinterpreting, did not say rounding up or estimating generously. They said engineering, a word that carries within it a specific intentionality, a calculation, a deliberate and conscious construction of a false picture designed to...
Because it is not simply dishonest in the ordinary way that inflated bureaucratic statistics are dishonest, it is an act of corruption of one of American law enforcement's most recognizable, most historically significant, and most deeply trusted programs, the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. A program you know, a program your parents knew, a program that has existed for decades and carries with it an enormous weight of institutional meaning. Because the concept behind it is simple and powerful, these are the 10 most dangerous fugitives in the world, the ones the Bureau has been hunting sometimes for years and has not yet been able to capture. And getting onto that list signals something real and serious. It means the full weight of the Federal Bureau of...
Because Patel told the Senate that his FBI had arrested 8 of the 10 most wanted fugitives in the world in 14 months, twice as many as the entire previous administration managed in 4 years. And he said it with pride, and he said it with authority, and he used it as evidence that the Bureau was performing at a historic level under his direction. And here is what the reporting actually found. Of those 8 fugitives Patel claimed as captures, 4 were added to the most wanted list within 1 month of their arrest, not 1 year before, not 6 months, not even 3 months, 1 month. And 2 of the 8 were added to the list within 24 hours of being captured, and one was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Because law enforcement professionals with decades of experience told reporters exactly what it means, which is that operations to seize dangerous fugitives do not happen in 73 minutes. You do not identify a target and build a case and secure surveillance and coordinate a capture team across multiple agencies and obtain whatever legal authorities may be required, and then execute a safe and successful arrest in the time it takes to watch a movie. That is not how law enforcement works. That is not how any of this works. And what you can do in 73 minutes is add a name to a list that you already know you are about to cross off and then schedule a press conference about it. And that is precisely what the sources who spoke to that symbol of the FBI's commitment to hunting the most dangerous people in the world was not being used to hunt dangerous criminals. It was being used to manufacture a number for a Senate hearing. It was being used as a prop in the same way that Black Placard was a prop. And both the placard and the manipulated list were deployed in service of the same goal, which was to allow Kash Patel to stand before the United States Senate and avoid answering the actual questions being put to him. Because the senator's questions were described by those present as blistering, and the context in which those questions were asked is important. Because Kash Patel had spent weeks in the headlines before that hearing, not as legitimate counterintelligence tools, but as instruments of political intimidation, loyalty screenings dressed up in the machinery of official procedure, reports of career law enforcement professionals being fired for political reasons, agents who had built cases and run operations and dedicated decades to the Bureau, removed because of their perceived political affiliations or because of past conduct that someone in the new leadership decided was incompatible with the direction Patel wanted to take the FBI. All of this was the backdrop against which yesterday's Senate hearing took place. All of this was what the senators were trying to get answers about. And Patel's response to questions about his drinking was to cite arrest. His response to questions about his management style and his judgment and his character was to stand in front of a co-equal branch of government and say the mission has never been better. And that is a choice, and it is a choice that tells you something very specific about a man's relationship with the truth. And it is also worth noting the particular way in which Patel's credibility has unravelled across multiple fronts simultaneously. Because when the drinking allegations first surfaced, Patel did what many officials do when confronted with damaging reporting. He filed a defamation lawsuit, a $250 million defamation lawsuit, and within days of filing that lawsuit, he publicly confirmed in a letter he had written to his own lawsuit became evidence. And there is something almost clarifying about that sequence of events, about a man whose instinct when confronted with the truth is to reach for a legal weapon and who then inadvertently confirms the story he was trying to kill. And the polygraph situation deserves its own moment of attention because it is not a minor footnote. Administering lie detector tests to your own agents as a mechanism of political control, using the machinery of counterintelligence against the very people whose job it is to conduct counterintelligence, is a profound corruption of institutional purpose. It transforms a legitimate investigative tool into an instrument of fear, and the agents which makes it all the more significant that a current FBI official chose to speak on the record with their name attached to reporters. Because that is not a decision made lightly. That is not a decision made without understanding exactly what it might cost. And the fact that they made it anyway, the fact that they looked at the situation inside their bureau and decided that the risk of silence was greater than the risk of speaking, tells you something essential about the severity of what they were seeing. And the investigative reporters Carol Leonig and Ken Delinian have been careful and precise in their documentation of what those sources said and what the evidence shows. And what it shows is a pattern that goes beyond any single statistic. And the violent crime statistics Patel cited before the Senate are another example of this pattern. Because when Patel talked about falling murder rates and reduced violent crime as evidence of his bureau's effectiveness, he was taking credit for outcomes over which the FBI does not have primary jurisdiction. Because homicide is a state crime. Violent crime in most of its forms is investigated and prosecuted at the state and local level. The FBI is not the primary agency responsible for the murder rate in American cities. That responsibility belongs to local police departments and state law enforcement agencies, reflect the performance of his bureau. He is not due, noting that what is missing from Patel's statistics is any meaningful accounting of the cases that used to define what the FBI actually does: public corruption investigations, terrorism cases, international narcotics trafficking, child exploitation and sex trafficking, the bread and butter of federal law enforcement, the work that requires the particular capabilities and authorities of a federal agency, the work that local police cannot do. And the fact that Patel is not leading with those numbers, the fact that those are not what he puts on his placard, tells its own story about where the Bureau's priorities have actually been directed under his leadership. And a former FBI official described Patel as widely viewed within the organisation as a clown. And the damage that has been done is real, and it is documented, and it lives in the individual careers of agents who have been fired for political reasons, in the programmes that have been deprioritised in favour of immigration enforcement statistics, in the institutional trust that has been eroded by the manipulation of the very data that the Bureau uses to account for itself to the public and to Congress. And the oversight failure is also part of this story. Because at every hearing where Patel has struggled to defend himself against allegations about his integrity and his judgment and his character, The mechanisms of congressional oversight that are supposed to function as a check on exactly this kind of conduct have not functioned as they should. And
What accountability looks like in this particular institutional moment is a question that does not yet have an answer, but it is the question that now belongs to those institutions and to the American public that they serve. And before any of that is resolved, it is worth taking a moment to say something about the people who are least visible in this story, and perhaps most important to it, the men and women of the Federal Bureau of Investigation who are working right now, tonight, building their cases and protecting their witnesses and doing the actual work of federal law enforcement without any reference to press conferences or placards or Senate hearings or a director's approval ratings, the agents who never asked to be deployed on immigration sweeps, who made the calculation that the American public's right to know what was happening to their institution outweighed the personal and professional risk that speaking carried, because that calculation is not a small one, and it is not made easily, and it reflects a specific kind of institutional loyalty. Loyalty not to a director or to a political moment, but to the mission itself. To the idea that the FBI exists to do something real and important, and that when the numbers used to describe that work are being manufactured for a Senate hearing, the people who know it are obligated to say so, and what we know with precision tonight is this. Kash Patel testified before the United States Senate and cited an arrest figure of 40.
the doubling he boasted about came from a policy change, not from more criminals taken off American streets. He cited captures from the FBI's most wanted list, of which 4 were added within 1 month of capture. 2 within 24 hours, and 1 was added and arrested in 73 minutes. Law enforcement professionals say operations like that do not happen in 73 minutes. And what does happen in 73 minutes is adding a name to a list you already know you are crossing off. He took credit for violent crime statistics over which the FBI does not have primary jurisdiction, and in doing so stole credit from the state and local law enforcement agencies that actually did that work. And through all of it,
Current officials inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation went to reporters on the record and said, "This is not true, this is not what we are, and you deserve to know," and Kash Patel lied to Congress. That is not an accusation made lightly, and it is not one made without basis. It is what 6 law enforcement sources, including a current FBI official, are telling reporters. And the question of what happens next belongs now to the Senate and to the Justice Department and to every American who understands that the integrity of the institution that is supposed to protect them depends on whether the people running it are permitted to manufacture the evidence of
their own performance without consequence.